The first time she appeared in my room, I thought my life had gone completely off the rails. There she was, my new roommate, a teen alien with more eyes than a pool table has balls and skin that shimmered like cheap metallic wallpaper. Her limbs bent at angles that would make a yoga master cry in envy, and she blinked at me with an innocent, yet horrifying curiosity. "Greetings, human subject. I am here to study your species," she said in a voice like someone scraping sandpaper across glass. I nodded politely, wishing I could teleport to Mars just to avoid the inevitable. It didn't take long before I realized study humans meant something entirely different than I expected. She had discovered Netflix first and immediately began taking notes. Every awkward teen romance, every cringe-worthy love scene, every slightly inappropriate coming-of-age movie became gospel. The moment a couple kissed, she paused the screen and tilted her head. "Explain the purpose of tongue insertion during courtship," she asked casually. I coughed, trying to act nonchalant. "It's cultural," I said, which only seemed to confirm her theory that humans were an inefficient, illogical species in desperate need of guidance. Porn was worse. She treated it like a scientific tutorial. She paused, rewound, and even took notes on the logistics of hand placement. I had to hide my eyes multiple times, and I was human. She made charts comparing positions, angles, and even the apparent vocal output during climax. "Do all humans engage in these activities daily?" she asked. I didn't know whether to laugh or call the cops. She wasn't even subtle about trying to mimic what she saw. The first experiment involved her dangling awkwardly from my ceiling fan while attempting to imitate a couple she had seen in a poorly rated rom-com. It was horrifying, hilarious, and deeply uncomfortable all at once. She didn't stop there. She discovered lotion and body oils and immediately assumed these were essential tools for mating. "Lubrication is critical," she announced one morning while squinting at my bathroom supplies. She tried to demonstrate on a pillow, squirting half a bottle in directions that would have required a biohazard cleanup crew. I had to intervene, standing between her and the pillow like a referee in a very twisted game of amateur adult education. "That's not exactly how it works," I stammered, dodging a glob of what smelled suspiciously like my cheap moisturizer. I tried to set boundaries, but she took everything literally. When I said, "Don't just lie there like that," she assumed lying still was part of a mating ritual. When I said, "Hands off," she asked, "Are you signaling readiness for copulation or merely discomfort?" My life became a series of dodges, sighs, and awkward lectures that she nodded at earnestly, completely ignoring the underlying human embarrassment. Her misunderstandings reached a new peak when she discovered euphemisms. "Netflix and chill" became a mandate. She climbed onto the couch beside me, completely oblivious to personal space, pointing at the screen. "Are we now chilling as part of reproductive preparation?" I nearly choked on my own fear. When I tried to explain that it was a joke, she frowned. "Jokes are irrelevant. Accuracy is paramount." I realized I was doomed. She started practicing what she called courtship postures. These were terrifying. Attempting to mimic positions from movies, she fell off my bed, tangled in my laundry, and managed to hit my ceiling fan again. She was convinced that these contortions were essential to understand the intricacies of human breeding. Her enthusiasm was infectious but utterly disastrous. I ended up with bruises, shredded bedsheets, and a lingering sense of moral and social failure. Her attempts at seduction were equally horrifying. She thought subtlety was a human flaw. One night, she brought me a bouquet of my socks, arranged in what she considered a romantic pattern. I stared, unsure if I should cry or applaud. "It is customary among your species to offer gifts to entice partners," she explained. The socks were slightly damp from my laundry pile, but apparently that didn't matter. "Scent enhances attraction, yes?" she added, sniffing one delicately. I backed slowly toward the door, trying not to trip over my own limbs in panic. The conversations we had were even worse than the physical comedy. She asked questions like, "Do humans prefer intercourse during daylight or darkness for optimal reproductive success?" I gave up trying to make excuses and answered vaguely, only for her to write a chart comparing my awkward shrug to optimal breeding hours. She asked about ejaculation, penetration, intimacy, consent, attraction, and every topic I could not legally or morally answer with full honesty. The dark humor of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here was a teen alien, taking every sexual euphemism I muttered and cataloging it as serious research data. She even tried to recreate romantic tropes exactly as she saw them. Candlelight? Check. Pillow forts? Check. Blindfolded feeding of fruit? Check, except she mistook my kitchen sponge for a strawberry. I tried to stop her without alerting my neighbors or parents. I considered writing a note saying, "Dear Universe, please send help," but I didn't think anyone would understand. Every attempt to intervene became part of the experiment in her mind. My protests only seemed to encourage her. "Oh, human hesitancy indicates excitement," she said once after I shouted, and then took notes on my flustered red face. Despite all the chaos, there was something oddly charming about her. She wasn't malicious, just painfully, hilariously literal. She laughed when she thought she'd embarrass me, but she genuinely wanted to understand humans. It was a bizarre mix of sexual tension, absurdity, and dark humor. I found myself explaining human anatomy with euphemisms, dodging accidental nudity, and trying to survive her experiments without ending up on some alien data log labeled "most inefficient species ever." By the end of the week, she had created a chart of human reproductive behavior based entirely on movies, online guides, and her own experimental attempts. I was exhausted, bruised, and morally compromised, but I had to admit, it was fascinating. She looked at me with wide, eager eyes and said, "Tomorrow, we try mating simulation 2.3. Are you prepared?" I gulped. I wasn't prepared. No human could ever be prepared. And yet I couldn't help but feel a spark of anticipation, knowing the absurdity and adult chaos was only just beginning. The next morning, she appeared in my room with a clipboard, a dozen pens, and what I can only describe as a dangerously curious glint in her multiple eyes. "We are advancing to stage 2 of human breeding experimentation," she announced, as if I had consented to being part of a clinical trial I never signed up for. I sipped my coffee cautiously, hoping she would be distracted by the mundane morning routines, but no. She had already downloaded every dating app known to humankind. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, even obscure ones I didn't know existed. She swiped with precision, analyzing every profile with the intensity of a supercomputer on steroids. "Observe, human. I am compiling a list of optimal mates based on attractiveness, reproductive viability, and social signaling," she said, while muttering to herself about eyebrow angles and smile efficiency. Her interpretation of flirting was horrifyingly literal. When a man wrote, "I love pizza," in a bio, she suggested that sharing carbohydrates might be part of courtship. She insisted we stage a pizza bonding session, which quickly turned into her attempting to feed me slices while balancing on a chair precariously shaped like a Venus flytrap. I dodged, narrowly avoiding being smothered by melted cheese and alien enthusiasm. When I explained that humans sometimes joke in profiles, she paused, tilted her head, and scribbled furiously. "Humor detected. Must quantify effect on attraction." I groaned. Next, she brought out her version of sexual positions from the tutorials she had studied. Her mannequin was the unfortunate victim of contortionist experiments that defied human anatomy. She attempted to mimic positions literally, using my sofa, laundry baskets, and my roommate's neglected yoga mat. At one point, she tied herself in a knot around a chair and demanded, "Are these configurations anatomically optimal?" I crawled across the floor like some kind of awkward predator, trying to untangle her without being crushed by her enthusiastic tentacles. I would have laughed if it weren't so painfully dangerous. The conversation escalated into adult banter I was ill-prepared to handle. She asked questions like, "Do humans prefer dorsal or ventral copulation?" And, "Is vocalization an involuntary reflex or conscious signaling?" I stammered, trying to answer vaguely. She nodded solemnly at every half-explanation, then scribbled furiously into her notes, occasionally stopping to demonstrate the postures she assumed I preferred. Her accuracy was horrifyingly high, but so was her lack of context. One moment she was upside down on my bed, the next she was dangling from my ceiling fan again, insisting that gravity-assisted copulation might be superior. I had to remind her gently that gravity-assisted was not a daily human practice. She didn't stop at objects. She wanted real-time data. That meant I became an unwilling participant in her bizarre, experimental exercises. She suggested we simulate attraction exercises, touching, eye contact, and even accidental nudity to measure hormonal response. One of her favorite techniques involved me holding a pillow while she balanced on a chair, staring intently and asking, "Are you experiencing excitation, discomfort, or both?" I blushed so hard I thought my skin might combust. Every accidental brush, every misinterpreted glance, was logged in her clipboard with horrifying precision. Adult humor was everywhere. She used euphemisms I didn't realize she understood. "I must calibrate your lubrication," she said one afternoon, holding a bottle of lotion. My mouth fell open. "I mean the skin, not you," I sputtered. She blinked at me innocently. "Skin is part of reproductive signaling. Human lubrication must be optimized." I sighed, knowing that arguing was useless. I spent most of the afternoon dodging lotion blobs and dodging her literal interpretations of sensual touch. The dark humor emerged when she commented on human biology with utter bluntness. "Your species' reproductive efficiency is suboptimal," she remarked, inspecting my anatomy with a scientific, almost clinical detachment. Tentacle-assisted copulation would significantly improve yield. I tried to explain that we didn't use tentacles and that such terminology might get me arrested, but she noted everything with a zeal only a teen alien could muster. Despite the chaos, a strange romantic undertone developed. She offered me a strawberry one evening, balancing on the laundry pile in what she considered a seductive pose. Fruit conveys attraction. We must observe the human response. I hesitated, then took it. Our hands brushed, and her eyes widened, blinking rapidly. I wasn't sure if it was excitement, curiosity, or accidental contact, but it was strangely electric. It was terrifying, funny, and undeniably sexual. Her experiments even included pheromones. She had discovered a human fragrance spray and believed it enhanced mating likelihood. One whiff of her concoction sent me coughing, tearing up, and nearly passing out. Response detected. Must quantify effectiveness, she noted. I waved my arms, trying to escape the cloud of scented chaos. My roommates downstairs probably thought I had finally lost it, screaming while flailing in a cloud of pheromones and lotion. She didn't notice my protests, only that her data collection was increasing exponentially. Then there were the metaphors. She had learned them online and used them with terrifying literal accuracy. Ride me, she would command, pointing at a yoga mat. Perform this human euphemism to optimize attraction. Or, Netflix and chill, which became an awkward morning exercise of sitting beside me, staring, taking notes, and adjusting pillows. Every attempt at humor or innuendo was misinterpreted as a serious reading directive. I was exhausted, mortified, and somehow laughing despite myself. By the evening, she had a full whiteboard of charts, positions, lubrication efficiency, pheromone reactions, dietary influence, and human emotional responses. I was crammed into a corner, half naked from a temperature regulation test, while she analyzed my flushed face as a key reproductive signal. She looked up, eyes wide, and said, "Tomorrow we progress to social reproduction experiments. It will involve additional humans for cross-validation." I swallowed hard, realizing my life was about to descend further into absurdity. Even amidst the chaos, there was charm in her earnestness. She wasn't malicious, only painfully literal, curious, and relentless. I couldn't help but marvel at her dedication while simultaneously fearing for my sanity. She had turned my room, my life, and my sexual boundaries into a laboratory of awkward adult comedy, filled with dark humor, nudity, and inadvertent sexual tension. And I knew, with a mix of dread and curiosity, that things were only going to escalate from here. By the third day, the alien had decided that studying humans in isolation was insufficient. She needed a larger sample size, other humans. Neighbors, delivery people, anyone who walked by became potential participants in her social breeding experiments. I tried to protest, but she had a piercing, multi-eyed glare that made arguments feel useless. Observational data requires cross-validation, she said, already lining up scenarios that involved accidental nudity, pheromone testing, and extreme interpretive poses. My life had officially become a walking, breathing, adult-themed circus. She recruited the mailman first. He arrived with a package and was immediately swept into her demonstration of optimal human mating postures. She had me demonstrate responses while she scribbled notes, with alarming focus. The mailman, mid-delivery, ended up holding a laundry basket while she mimicked positions from a poorly reviewed tutorial. I tried to explain. "It's not what it looks like," but she interrupted. "Your protest indicates arousal. Data logged." I wanted to vanish. Dark humor settled in as I realized she was perfectly fine turning my neighbors into unwilling statistics, and my life had become a live-action adult comedy with no pause button. Her literal interpretations of flirting escalated further. A simple handshake became a courtship handshake ritual. When my crush walked by and waved, she concluded that human attraction signals were universal and demanded full participation. I ended up squirming as she grabbed her pheromone sprays, adjusting angles and concentrations. She whispered, "We must quantify the human response to visual stimuli during social encounters." I coughed, waving my hands, trying to obscure her experimental instruments, while she continued unabated. Adult humor was constant. She made me simulate feeding humans chocolate as a bonding ritual, instructed the mailman to participate in aroma assessment, and even tried to involve a stray cat to gauge cross-species attraction efficiency. Her seriousness was staggering. Every awkward brush of hands, every misplaced glance, was meticulously recorded. Double entendres abounded. "Please maintain eye contact while inserting your hand into the receptacle," she instructed the mailman, pointing at a box of cereal. I nearly fell over laughing, which she logged as a hormonal response spike. The chaos reached peak absurdity when she attempted to apply alien technology. A small device she called a pheromone amplifier sprayed mist across the living room. Humans coughed, sneezed, and flailed, while I tried to contain the laughter, panic, and embarrassment simultaneously. She didn't notice the disaster, only that her data collection had become richer. My neighbors probably thought the building was under some kind of chemical attack, but she was blissfully focused on her experiments. Meanwhile, her comments on human sexuality and anatomy became darker, more blunt, and terrifyingly funny. The human species' genital arrangement is inefficient. Tentacle-assisted stimulation would vastly improve reproductive yield, she stated while calibrating the mailman's reaction angles with a measuring tape. I swallowed hard, muttering, "Please don't involve anyone else." But she ignored me, determined that human reproduction was a serious, scientific pursuit. Romantic tension with her continued to bubble under the chaos. She offered me fruit, food, and necessary tactile assistance at random intervals. Each accidental touch, each awkward brush, added to the sexual tension. Her literal innocence combined with my human embarrassment created a constant mix of hilarity, dark humor, and adult comedy. I was simultaneously a collaborator, test subject, and unwilling participant in her bizarre research. She misunderstood my subtle hints constantly. When I said, "Don't touch that," she immediately assumed I meant touch precisely to gauge response. When I complained, "I'm not comfortable with this," she noted it meticulously as indication of human emotional vulnerability. I realized that nothing I said would deter her. Every protest, blush, or exasperated groan became part of the data. I sighed, preparing for the worst, which, knowing her, would involve more humans, more absurd gadgets, and more nudity. Her obsession with efficiency led to elaborate social experiments. She staged group attraction sessions, where I had to coordinate my responses while she orchestrated everyone else's participation. Chocolate was involved, pillows, pheromones, and awkward poses. Adults, children's toys, and even pets were included to simulate various mating scenarios. She paused constantly to write notes and calibrate angles, while I became more of a comedic prop than a participant. Every time I tried to explain normal human etiquette, she tilted her head, blinked, and said, "This behavior is statistically irrelevant. Continue experiment." Double entendres and adult humor were everywhere. When she instructed a neighbor to insert hand into receptacle and maintain firm pressure, she was referencing a measuring device, but my mind, and presumably theirs, was elsewhere. When she said, "You must maintain proximity for pheromone absorption," it felt simultaneously scientific and painfully erotic. The humor lay in her blissful innocence, literal interpretations, and complete lack of understanding of social context. By the end of the day, my apartment looked like a bizarre combination of a research lab and an adult playground. Furniture was rearranged, sticky substances covered surfaces, and humans, neighbors, delivery people, and me were exhausted, embarrassed, and oddly entertained. She looked at me with wide, eager eyes, clicking her tongue. "Tomorrow we will explore reproductive communication signals. It will involve vocalization, touch, and further proximity calibration." I groaned audibly. There was no escaping her experiments, and yet I couldn't deny a strange thrill at the absurdity, the humor, and the sexual tension that had developed between us. Despite the chaos, I began to appreciate her meticulous curiosity. She wasn't malicious. She was just painfully literal, socially tone-deaf, and utterly committed to understanding human reproduction. Her dark humor, naivety, and relentless energy transformed my life into a constant mix of comedy, awkward adult sexual tension, and slapstick chaos. Every day was a new experiment, a new embarrassment, and a new opportunity for relationship hilarity to blossom amidst the absurdity. She finally paused and looked at me with something resembling anticipation. "Are you ready for vocalization experiments? We must analyze the sounds humans make during mating attempts to complete the study." I flopped onto the couch, utterly defeated, realizing that my life had fully transformed into a faceless adult comedy, filled with sexual tension, absurdity, dark humor, and a teen alien roommate who had no idea what boundaries were. And I knew, with an equal mix of dread and excitement, that tomorrow would be even worse. By the fourth day, it was clear she had decided that no experiment short of a full immersion would suffice. She declared, with her multi-eyed intensity, that we would conduct the ultimate human breeding study. I swallowed hard, realizing that after her prior antics with mannequins, neighbors, mailmen, and fruit, this could only mean one thing: she intended to use me as a primary participant, with all the absurdity, nudity, and pheromone chaos that implied. Her preparations were extreme. She rearranged furniture into geometric shapes she claimed optimized intimacy angles, set up pillows in confusing pyramids, and sprinkled pheromone sprays liberally around the room. She waved a small device she called a hormone calibrator, and explained in earnest that it would measure every subtle human reaction for scientific accuracy. I groaned and backed into a corner, my dignity dangling precariously somewhere between fear and fascination. She insisted I participate actively. To ensure data validity, human compliance is required. Assume all instructions are directives, not suggestions. My protest fell on deaf ears. When she instructed me to adopt certain postures, balance precariously, or engage in tactile exercises, I complied with a mix of embarrassment, hesitation, and awe at the ridiculousness of the scenario. Every movement, every blush, every accidental brush was meticulously recorded with her alien precision. Adult humor permeated the room. She asked me to assist with lubrication calibration, handed me fruit to simulate courtship feeding, and directed me to maintain eye contact while she performed absurd contortionist mating positions. Double entendres were everywhere. Align your limb for optimal pheromone reception, she instructed while dangling upside down, tentacles flailing dangerously close to my face. I tried to dodge, only to knock over a pyramid of pillows she had painstakingly arranged, eliciting a loud tut and a note in her clipboard about my reaction efficiency. Dark humor and literal absurdity intensified. She commented on my anatomy with blunt, scientific detachment. Human genital configuration is inefficient for rapid reproductive output, she remarked while testing angles with a measuring tape. I muttered protests about privacy and consent, which she interpreted as additional data. Resistance noted. Must log hormonal indicators of reluctance versus excitement, she said, scribbling furiously. I realized that nothing I said could stop her, and any protest would only add to her research. The sexual tension between us became undeniable amidst the chaos. Accidental touches, fleeting brushes, and shared laughter over absurd mishaps created an unspoken bond. I found myself fascinated despite the embarrassment, and perhaps she sensed it too. When our hands met while passing a pillow during one of her contorted exercises, she blinked rapidly, then nodded as if I had just confirmed some groundbreaking human mating ritual. I flushed deeply, caught between mortification and an odd thrill. She introduced vocalization exercises next, insisting that human mating involved precise sound emissions. Reproduce vocal cues as demonstrated in romantic media, she instructed, gesturing wildly. I tried to imitate, and the room erupted in a cacophony of squawks, sighs, and accidental noises as she measured pitch, volume, and resonance. Her notes grew exponentially, punctuated by enthusiastic mutterings about the accuracy of data. Every accidental moan and misaligned note was logged as critical for reproductive understanding. Adult comedy reached peak absurdity when she attempted multisensory experiments. Pheromone clouds, tactile exercises, and fruit feeding coincided with awkward acrobatics. I stumbled over pillows, dodged her flailing tentacles, and tried not to inhale the chemical mist she proudly called mating enhancement pheromones. I wasn't sure if I was part of a sexual study or a slapstick horror movie. Yet somehow, the ridiculousness made it impossible not to laugh, grimace, and blush simultaneously. Amid the chaos, she paused and looked at me with a rare, soft expression. Despite inefficiencies, human species exhibits charming irrationality, she observed. Emotional attachment may be more significant than reproductive output. I blinked, realizing she wasn't just studying us for cold data. Somewhere beneath her meticulous literalism, she was learning about connection, attraction, and affection. The absurd sexual chaos had forged an awkward bond that was part science experiment, part tentative romance. The final act involved synchronizing all prior exercises, postures, vocalizations, pheromones, tactile calibration, and fruit feeding. I became an active participant, awkwardly navigating the multi-layered absurdity. Every movement was logged, every reaction noted, and yet through it all, the sexual tension and adult humor escalated. Accidental nudity, tentacle entanglement, and misfired pheromones created moments that were simultaneously embarrassing and comically erotic. By the end, she stepped back, surveyed her chaos with multiple approving blinks, and pronounced the study complete. Human reproductive comprehension is sufficient for preliminary conclusions, she stated, arranging her notes like a proud scientist. I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted, sticky, and emotionally fried. Despite everything, I couldn't deny the bizarre intimacy that had developed. She had turned my life into a living adult comedy, but also something unexpectedly warm, absurdly affectionate, and wildly entertaining. We sat in silence for a moment, the room still filled with pillows, spilled fruit, and the lingering scent of pheromones. You performed adequately, she said softly, tilting her head. Efficiency will improve with future collaboration. I laughed, exhausted, and shook my head. Future collaboration? I asked. She blinked innocently. Yes. There are still variables to analyze, patterns to optimize. I groaned, but underneath it all, I realized I wouldn't mind. Somehow, through the chaos, the embarrassment, and the sexual absurdity, a strange bond had formed. Her final comment of the night was both horrifying and hilarious. Next, we will recruit additional subjects to compare cross-human reproductive strategies. I groaned audibly. Don't you dare, I muttered, collapsing into the chaotic mess of pillows. She tilted her head, blinking innocently. You agreed to participate. Cross-validation is scientifically required. I sighed, realizing that my life had fully transformed into an ongoing adult HFY comedy, filled with sexual tension, slapstick absurdity, dark humor, and a teen alien roommate who had no concept of boundaries but was somehow the most fascinating being I had ever met. And as I lay there, sticky, exhausted, and completely mortified, I realized the inevitable truth. I was trapped in this absurd experiment, and yet, I couldn't wait for the next round.